Hello, welcome to the No Way Jose podcast. Today I'm joined by a patron of the show, Tiller, because I like talking to you guys. You guys have interesting things to say, and I always like when the content comes to me, so why not incentivize that? Today we will be talking about Marcionism, digging into that topic, a little bit off the beaten path of what we typically cover, although I think there's a lot of crossover, a lot of symbolism. I think it's really worthwhile taking the dive into this. So I'm interested into hearing more. We will see you in the show. Make sure to subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. We'll see you.
Just hold my heart, be close to you. Remember how it always beats for you. I'm falling at the speed of light. I'm staring at your shrinking face. Don't cry. You know my heart belongs to you. One last time, say that you want me to. The only words that gave me life. Now I see you on the other side.
Big shout out to that the thin line 123. That's good. I meant to give him a shout out at the jump, but big shout out to him. He's also the one who did the intro for Already Dead. That absolute banger. So I've been sitting on that one for a while. I'm glad to finally get the chance to use it. But today we have Tiller with us. Pleasure to have you here. You look absolutely fabulous. We had a little bit of technical difficulties and we had to make do. So that's the cat ears. We're going the way of Fuentes. So, yeah, so glad to have you with me, brother. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience? I guess kind of give whatever kind of summation you want to give people of you and what you're about and the like. Maybe what kind of brought you, I don't know, in the sphere, I guess, kind of. I don't know. You are a supporter of the show, so I'm kind of interested how you fell into the show, whether it was through the comedy angle. I don't know. I've been on a bunch of different platforms. It's always interesting to see how you came here, or maybe you came through Austin. We never know. Who knows the Schizo Bros path you came down?
Great question, actually. I either found you specifically on Twitter, and then found Tower Gang, and then your specific channel, or vice versa. I found Tower Gang probably through Clint, actually, because I've been a follower of Clint for some time. So connecting the dots in that sort of way, I probably found Clint and then stumbled into Tower Gang because he probably actually no, he very often would say like, I also do Tower Gang. Don't go watch that. That's how I found Tower Gang, and then you, and then your Twitter, and then I found out you do your own show. And I think that's probably the after the whole split, you probably do the best and most frequent content out of the five of you, I believe.
All right. Well, I appreciate the the up. So I guess you're kind of more of the Tower Gang, sort of through Clint. Kind of weird. It is. There's so many different avenues, so it is interesting to see how you go.
The fact that I am a Tower Gang enjoyer should not reflect upon the church in any way, shape, or form. Just to distance the church. The church is a great place. I am a degenerate that has found Jesus.
Yes. I have not, but But I don't know. Yes, we're all a little bit degenerate in our own different ways, but I don't think it's always necessarily that bad. It's okay to have a little bit of fun. But today I brought you on to talk about Marcionism. You kind of, I don't know, I like to farm my people for content. I like to talk to you guys. And you seem to make an appeal for it. Now, it strikes me from the little tiny bit I've dug into the Marcionism, it strikes me as basically Gnosticism. Is there any sort of meaningful difference between it and Gnosticism, or is it just some
Major,
sect of it?
major difference for sure. That's actually one of the things that we like to differentiate. To say it's we have certain things in common in the sense that a lot of Gnostic Christians are non-Judeo. Marcionites are also non-Judeo as well, but one of the key differences is like and Gnostics are going to get mad right away 5 minutes in, and I'm already going to make some friends. But they seem to let Yahweh, the Jewish God, live rent free in their head for their entire life. So they just wake up and find reasons to be angry at Yahweh rather than waking up and finding reasons to appreciate Jesus.
So that's the key difference, is that they're malding about it and you guys aren't.
Not the key difference, but a lot of Gnostics will use like the Nag Hammadi. Highly recommended though. Like as a Marcionite, I still read it, and like the Testamentum, you can only read through it so many times. You got to get something new, fresh things to. I'm a ponderer. I have a stack of a bunch of different Bibles over to my right. I have a weird affinity of collecting old Bibles. I just think they're neat and interesting. And the Nag Hammadi is one that I want to actually put in my physical collection. But it's certainly interesting, especially if you like read the book of Genesis and you're like, huh, there's got to be something more here. The Nag Hammadi is like, oh, there's more here. But that's not Marcionism, and I'd like to talk more about that than Hebrew nonsense.
Yeah, and well, I guess just to say a little bit on the Hebrew nonsense as maybe an opening to kind of get into what it is. I guess this is more kind of in the realm of what makes it similar. And I think maybe I don't want to talk past our audience here, because I know what like the kind of what I'm driving at, and what we're talking about when you say they're non-Judeo. But I guess kind of, I mean, maybe we should just spell it out for our audience, like kind of this key difference between like Judeo-Christianity and like the Gnostics or the Marcionists, or what is that key difference? I mean, I don't know if I guess I could pass it off to you to lay out. I mean, I know I can. It's obviously that, and funny enough, as me being someone who is an agnostic atheist, it's kind of an appealing argument in a sense, because it is like, if you do look at the full body of the Bible, you do see the Old Testament and New Testament, and you do see like it's always this like weird confounded argument about some sort of Jesus did something in relation to law, and that's how it's somehow different than it was before, or whatever the fuck. And
Yeah.
so, therefore, it was okay that he was a dick and was like, totally advocating genocide and like, doing all this crazy, like murder everyone except for the women that still have their hymens, like just insane, like barbaric stuff. And then you're like, but then New Testament comes, and we're like, we're chill now, something to do with the law or something, so we're cool. Depending on your interpretation, somehow it makes you find a way to connect those two dots. Whereas it seems like Gnosticism, Marcionism just go, no, your instinct is correct. You got bamboozled, which leads to this inevitable. Okay, well then there was a death cult, and we might still be seeing that today. But I'll pass it off to you to kind of lay it out. I guess I kind of reveal it there a little bit, but go ahead.
No, you're not. By no means you're stepping on any toes. You're a lot of right. It is pretty funny, isn't it? How you don't have to get any more than I think 9 chapters into Genesis to go like, wait a minute, he sent 2 angels down to a place to go get raped or something like that. Pardon me, sorry about YouTube, but you're not like live right now, are you?
No,
Like,
you're good. You say whatever. I don't give a shit.
all
Worst
right.
case scenario, I won't put it on YouTube. So
I should still church it up a little bit.
you're good.
But it is, I mean, to use the very, very realistic term of what exactly was happening. But I think better to focus on what Marcionism it stems from a guy called Marcion of Sinope. He went and followed, or he didn't follow. He went to where Paul went and wrote and collected all of his writings. He was very we I have a whole timeline pulled up over here of everything that he did. I'm not going to read everything off to him, but he was born in 70 CE, right there, and he goes off and he follows the path that Paul took and collects everything. I can get a little bit more into the timeline later, but he gathers up all the works and makes the first Christian scripture, and then hands it off to the churches of that time and said, "Here you go. I did all this work," and he was thanked by being excommunicated, exiled, and all that. But to answer the root of your question, like the difference, because there are a few, but there are more than one sects of Christianity that kind of point out the hypocrisies in the Old Testament. The difference between Marcionism and all of those is, well, why are you still reading the Old Testament? Why do you still give it the why do you still venerate it as holy texture texture scripture,
Mhm.
as holy text, holy scripture, same thing? And why do you still even use it? Why do you even let your kids read this, at that point? And more or less, we just kind of simplified. Well, it's not simplified. He has had the first, right? That's another thing, is many of the claims that people say ridiculous thing. Apparently, Marcion was a celibate, but he had a sex cult. There's again, I have a whole nother list of things that just don't make sense, where they were trying to bash this guy in a extremely unfair way.
To be fair, it could be like a semen retention cult, and so there's the, you know what I mean?
The
That's a
most
thing these
extreme
days.
no nut November ever.
Yeah,
It's just no nut ever.
yeah. Like a no nutting cult, which I guess in a certain sense is a sex cult, but it's the lack thereof, really. But go on.
As ridiculous as that sounds, um, but no, getting a little bit back to the less silliness of it. It's just quite simply, it's the most removed from Judeo Christianity you could possibly be. Um, you like it has. I mean, I have it right here actually. At the MarcioniteChurchofChrist.org, you can pick yourself up a nice copy of this. They have a hard copy and a soft copy, and it has not only it has the Evangelicon, which is just kind of Jesus's story in one book, not split into four gospels. And it has I think all of Paul's works, with some of Paul's works weren't brought into the Holy Bible, that is the current canon. As well as we have the first Psalm book that you actually can't find in the current Bible, as well as some of Marcion's own works. He has some really like really metal stuff in here. Like I would recommend reading one book from here, and it would actually not be anything that's in the current Bible. I would read Marcion's homily to Romans, where he's talking that he's in prison. This is when he came back, and he's writing while he's bound, and he doesn't know what they're going to do with them, because he's committed the crime of being a good scholar. And he's talking about how, the beast they have prepared for me, this guy thinks that he's going to get eaten alive, and he's like, don't feel bad for me. This is what you should be doing as a Christian. You are going to be, you're not going to have an easy life. You are going to be, attacked by for what you believe, because of the evil people that are in this world, and I am doing exactly what Jesus is asking me to do.
Mm-hmm. Uh, okay. To be clear, I guess I was kind of driving at. So to be very clear, the idea here is, I guess, it's the same exact thing with these two, with Gnosticism and Marcionism, is that the you guys see the God of the Old Testament as not the same God as the New Testament, or is there a different way of understanding
No,
it,
that's
perhaps?
correct.
Okay.
More or less, the difference between Marcionism and Gnostics. Gnostics still think that Yahweh, and whatever name you use for the Jewish God, is a legitimate god or deity or demiurge or whatever
Mhm.
word you want to put on it, he is still a god, but he's a god of wrath. He's a god of war. Whereas Marcionites, like, you can still technically be a Marcionite and believe, like, you could be like a Marcionite pagan. That's not like, we're not going to tell you you can't be in our church and believe those things, but the core belief of Marcionism is that Yahweh is either likely early man's first interactions with the devil, and if you were to meet the devil, you would think that he's a god too, right? I mean, like, think about what power the devil has,
Well, yeah.
and if you were to meet him, like, out of fear, one could definitely worship a devil. So the idea is that he's either like a lesser, certainly not a god, or probably most likely just made up. Like,
Mhm.
why did the thunder happen? Oh, Yahweh.
Yeah. Okay, so kind of a god of the gaps, but perhaps or maybe a little bit of an evil, more of an egregore than an actual entity. Really, is kind of what it's driving at. Which I didn't even realize that the Gnostics were actually believing that it was a legit god. Like I guess I kind of assumed that they thought that, like, I don't know. I guess I never really even put too much thought into if they thought there was a legitimate god, or I mean, I guess I would have thought there'd be a demon. Although even then, I guess with the Gnostics, they tend to have some weird. I don't know. It gets in this weird, like, Adam, and then this. They have a whole weird. I mean, is you guys, is not to get too into the weeds of the founding story, but is it very much, you kind of know what I'm driving at with some of
Yeah.
the weird, the oddness. It's a little. I mean, I say it's convoluted, but then again, so is Genesis, or really any creation story if you're not familiar with it. But I know the Gnostics have kind of a slightly different take. Is Marcionism the same, or is it somehow find a way to stay more in line with a more common understanding of a Christianity's genesis, to, I guess, to, pun intended somewhat,
We we don't really ascribe to it. Like, I brought up Genesis, but we don't have a creation story. Marcionism lets you kind of, like, there isn't a set in stone, like, this is what happened at the beginning of time, and this is why Adam and Eve were kicked out of heaven, and this is why our scripture starts in 29 CE, November 24th. We know it was a Thursday. Jesus descended from heaven, and that's another distinction. There is no virgin birth. Gnostics entertain the idea, I assume. Every Gnostic's going to be different from person to person, but they entertain the virgin birth idea, and they all these other Gnostic texts, and there were Gnostics before Christ, and then Gnostics took the story of Christ, and I'm not saying they perverted it. They like confirmation bias, right? If you heard about, like, oh man, this guy Jesus was healing people, and did you hear that last Friday they crucified him, he came back, and this and that, you'd think, oh well, wow, as a Gnostic, they already, I think, were polygamous back then, don't quote me. So obviously you would take that as, like, obviously this is proof of divine something, and they would just stick it in with what they already knew, and they would you know it's not a perversion, in more of an adaptation,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. And I think, but if you do think the Old Testament is kind of, the product of either an imagined God, or a demon, or the devil, or some sort of, it would make sense to be like, well, this is all nonsense. So, like, obviously, I'm not going to base any. So yeah, I guess it would make sense to start from Jesus showed up. From there we start. Okay, well, I guess now I think we probably can start laying out what exactly Marcionism is. I guess maybe one place good to start off with is how does Marcionism typically view Jesus? It sounds like they're you kind of it almost seems like maybe Marcionism is a semi-open. It sounds like there's pretty varying definitions of what a Marcionist is. It seems like perhaps. So I guess I'm kind of curious. How do you guys typically perceive the person of Christ?
That is one thing we are certainly more concrete on, is it's like, we know what we know, and what we know is Jesus for sure. was the Son of God. There's no confusion there. He goes around telling people, I am of my Father. This is why I am able to do these great things, is because I have the power of my Father with me. So there's no question there. And
And that's not like some anime lesson. The power is within all of us, and you're all kind of sons of God. It's not something like I know some people reconceptualize it with that. So
yeah, no, he's not Goku. He doesn't go off the power of friendship.
yeah,
If anything, he makes a lot more enemies than he does friends in his lifetime. Um, he is still alive, but you know what I mean. His
yeah.
human lifetime. But more or less, he is the son of the Father. There is still a Holy Spirit. There is still a Trinity. We believe in a traditional Trinity. Um, but yeah, we don't think that like he was just some sort of apparition that people were too confused to think. No, he came down in flesh because he is the Son of God. He can do such things. He came and performed miracles. We know that this happened, and we actually have like legal, like, I guess, documents, you would say. And interesting enough, the when you look at why Jesus was tried in the Roman documents, he was crucified for blasphemy. In the Hebrew text, he was crucified for sorcery, and both of those things are punishable by crucifixion. So I think that's kind of, it's not like, someone had a camera phone back then, but it's about as good a evidence that we have that Jesus did in fact perform miracles enough to where the Hebrew people were like, no, he's performing magic. He's got to go because of it.
Okay, I guess let's hone in on what this belief system is. What are probably some of the key belief systems within this? Because that's kind of what I was driving at there. I mean, heck, even as we were saying with Jesus, it's kind of like I mean, a lot of times with these different belief systems, it gets a little airy fairy kind of. Oh, we're all gods. We all can, through the power of friendship or whatever, yada yada, find some way to make this weird universalistic type concept. Just I guess kind of what are the main beats? What are the important things? I mean, like I know I grew up Baptist. Like if I was going to give the main beats, Jesus came, died for our sins. You say, hey, forgive me for all that stuff. And there's also this weird Baptist thing where you're supposed to like regularly check in and be like, yo, I did some fucked up stuff. Like, could you cover me for that one? And you're like, okay, cool. And then like, but even with Baptist, you're like always covered theoretically. Like technically, even though I would consider myself an atheist now, from my understanding of Southern Baptists, I think technically, I mean, they'd find a weird way to be like, well, you technically, that must mean you never actually believed to begin with, but like, I can tell you right now, I did at that time when I used to, but whatever. But point being, that's their belief system. They believe if you really believed it, you're covered by the blood of Christ forevermore. So theoretically, technically, by the Baptist belief system, I'm supposed to go to heaven. Although if I told any of them that, they would say, well, you're an atheist, so clearly you never really truly believed. It's a little convoluted, but you get what I'm getting at. What's the elevator pitch of the belief system for Marxism, Marcionism?
The core belief system of Marxism is that you just don't eat, and
Yeah,
communism works sometimes.
yeah.
Jokes aside, uh, your original question about the core belief system of Marcionism, you kind of already laid it out there. You believe in Christ, and therefore you are saved. There's no real extra steps. There's you should get baptized, but if you have a 2-month old and your 2-month old dies and wasn't baptized, your baby's not going to hell. We're not, we're sane people, at least most of us. I can't speak for everybody, but we're not gonna just say that people are damned who are clearly
Yeah, there's
innocent.
some sort of vague control or covered by the blood of Christ type of thing, like that one. I know that's what they say in most denominations when it comes to questions of like unborn or young children or mentally infirmed. It's covered by the blood of Christ. I mean, I don't know. We don't have to get too much in the weeds. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have to get that far, but you did kind of already cover it. You believe in Christ and then you're saved. I think the biggest difference, if I think, to answer the question you didn't ask, is the biggest difference between Marcionism and the other denominations of Christianity is what we don't believe. We don't believe that you have to come to church every Sunday. You just have to be faithful. Ideally, you want to be as Christ-like as possible. You want to follow his example, be decent people. That's really all you need to do. There is a lot more to it than that. uh, I can't just sit here and read the Evangelicon to you in under a half hour. I'm sorry, I'm not that great, But more or less, there are we have our own holidays, holy days. We do have our own sort of way of going about things, but essentially, believe in Jesus, be as Jesus-like as you possibly can. Fail sometimes, oh well, you don't have to go tell a funny man in a hat and he says, I forgive you, even though it's only God who forgives you. You know what I mean? A little dig at Catholicism there. It's weird. You said Baptist. I didn't know Baptists did confessions. I'll forever be intrigued by the very many different
Are there?
practices of so many different.
Were you
I
implying that I said that, or are you telling me that you knew of other Baptists that did that? Because when I was saying, I was meaning
thought that's
like
what you said.
no, okay, no, I was meaning like you are like my understanding of like the Baptist belief system is in your own like relationship with God. You're supposed to also regularly be asking for forgiveness for the things that you're doing.
Oh,
So it's a
oh,
little bit convoluted. Yeah.
talking to a man in a funny hat every
Yeah.
Sunday.
No. 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 No.
Confession
Yeah.
booth and Father.
Yeah, because I was just trying to the salvation aspect, the main beats. Like you're supposed to get you pray for forgiveness from the you recognize him your savior or whatever, yada yada yada,
Yeah, yeah.
and then you're covered and you're good. And you are supposed to. Well, technically, it doesn't actually, from my understanding, it's not like it's going to make it so you're therefore can't go to heaven or go to some sort of weird purgatory place or something. But you are still supposed to. I guess it's encouraged. I guess is a way to look at to regularly ask for forgiveness. I don't know. Like,
I
yeah.
don't think that it's a regularly thing. This is we're gonna get into my personal opinion, but I think that if you make a mistake, it's probably far better to just on the spot be like, "Ooh, man, that was me not being my best person. I'm sorry, Jesus." Or even sometimes me, I do it preemptively. I'll just be like, Jesus, I'm sorry. This probably isn't the best person I could be, but the situation calls for it, and my emotions are a little too high. That's a common one for me. I get a little bit, a little too ramped up, and I just let it fly, and then I later think like, okay, next time maybe I just walk away. I wish I could walk away more frequently, but that's too personal.
Yeah. So, what are some other key takeaways you feel like people should get from Marcionism? Some other things that are interesting that you would know that I wouldn't really know to pick at.
Um, well, our Christmas is November 24th. We already covered the non-Abrahamic thing. Uh, some other. Let me actually pull up a list of certain misconceptions real quick. Of course, my phone is deciding to. Pardon me. Sorry for the dead space.
Oh, you're fine.
But there is a lot of misconceptions. Like a lot of people actually. Uh, I kind of sort of danced pretty close to this already. But another big thing is they'll be like, "Oh, Marcion, oh, the heretic, right? You follow the religion of that heretic." I'm like, okay, but who are you to call him a heretic, though? Like, what evidence do you have? What sin did he commit? Supposedly they'll say that he edited the Bible in a certain way, and for one, you don't know that. You don't really have any evidence of that. You're going by what some person said nearly 2,000 years ago, like saying that. How do you know that the person who you are reading from isn't lying? How do you know that he is the one that committed said crime? You know, and even so, like again, God is the one that is supposed to judge us. So if you think that he's a heretic, are you not? Why is my computer? You can still hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear
Okay, hold on. It's gotta just remind me later. Great time to ask me if I wanted to update.
you.
Uh, um, but as I was saying, a lot of people just think that he's heretical. Like they said, they like to make up that he was part of some sort of abstinence sex cult. They make up all sorts of very silly things about him. Um, but A couple interesting things. I kind of lost what the original question is, but something interesting is one thing that Marcionites actually had in common with the first couple century Christians is that the Holy Bible you read now is a Peterine or Peterine. I don't know how you Peterine sounds like something. Um, I don't really want to. I don't want to dirty this conversation any more than I may have already had. But it's what the Holy Bible currently is, and it's the Judaized version of the Holy Bible of the faith. Whereas Pauline or Pauline, however you actually pronounce that, is actually what most early Christians were. They believed in a at least less Judaized version of Christianity. It was far more common for them to believe in that sort of way of thinking. um, yeah, the original Bible, which is we have a reconstruction of it, but the Testamentum didn't follow these Peterine. It just sounds so silly. Um, uh, the original like Christian goals of the Council of the Nicene.
Nicene, yeah.
Yeah, Nicene Council. Um,
Was it Nicene or Nicene? I don't know. Now I'm
Greek,
questioning
but
myself.
for all I know, it could be the Council of the Neon Cat. I don't know. Um, I think I already covered everything in my list, actually.
Well, one thing I was thinking about that we didn't really cover, but maybe we could dig into a little bit more. What kind of we kind of teased that a little bit. You know, he's labeled the heretic off the jump. So kind of what I guess kind of the role that Marcionism has held in antiquity. I guess from the start to now. I mean, obviously, I don't. I mean, that probably could easily be like a 3-hour podcast, but kind of the kind of the beats, I guess, the main beats, or that you know of, or maybe anything of interest. I'd assume it probably resided in an interesting. I don't know, an interesting place in the history of religion, because it is like, I don't know. I guess I kind of alluded to in the beginning of the show how these things kind of tie in together. This may not be as like separated from the sort of stuff I typically cover as you might think. Like hell, even the intro, like as I alluded to, like a death cult. Like that's what those some of the bad stuff is there. But even then, the symbolism, and which is something I usually think of when I think of Gnosticism, you do see once you start realizing Gnosticism, the concepts of inversion and stuff, we see this played out in conspiracies and the elite all the time. And sometimes it'll be Christian symbols, sometimes it'll be Gnostic symbols, sometimes it'll be, it's kind of, and let's be real, in certain sense, Gnosticism or even Marcionism in some senses is a little bit of an inversion of the typical Judeo-Christian understanding, and vice versa. So these are these sort of symbols we see. So I think kind of looking at it from a historical perspective, and maybe even how it fits into that paradigm there, because especially if you're someone who thinks Marcionism's the correct way, and maybe that something like Gnosticism could be like maybe a little bit of a bastardization of some sort of semblance of your beliefs, that maybe you could start seeing the symbolism, some of the weirdness there. So I guess it's a little bit an open-ended, kind of ambiguous, vague question there. But I guess kind of the historical, significance, I guess, if you want to give some sort of rundown. And I guess the secondary thing I was driving at there is like, do you notice symbolism? Is there something that you pick up, from your understanding of Marcionism that maybe those who only really know of things like Gnosticism, or maybe, because even then Gnosticism's another layer once you learn about Gnosticism, because we always, people might just think of like, oh, Judaism and Christianism, and you kind of think of the big three, and then now you have to think Gnosticism, how do you incorporate that? It is all kind of confusing. And now you find out about Marcionism, which is kind of its own distinct thing from Gnosticism as well. And if I was a believer of that, I very much would think that Gnosticism was a bastardization of my beliefs. But anyways, I'm kind of dragging on there. I think you kind of get what I'm getting at, but yeah.
I think there was like two or three questions in there. So I think the first one was almost like you were asking about like a timeline almost.
Yeah, somewhat. Yeah, somewhat timeline, maybe the interesting parts, because I'm sure, and although I think these things are kind of questions tied into each other, because I think knowing the historical significance may start to give you some context for symbolic significance, and how it's used today.
For sure. So just to kind of really quickly touch on the history for you, because as soon as Jesus died, for the like next 15 years, there was a sort of theological war fought between the apostle Paul and against the Judaizers that were represented by the apostle Peter and James, and they were just like right away immediately trying to staple the Hebrew Bible to Christianity. And it kind of it around 48 CE, it came to a head where the first Christians, including Peter, Paul, and James, agreed that the Hebrew Bible laws were antithetical to the teachings of Christ, and that I can go off of for a while. I have examples from the Old Testament and the Testamentum that are great proof that the Old Testament God is absolutely not the God that Jesus was talking about.
I mean, if you want to provide one or two examples, go right ahead. And so.
Yeah, sure. Just two seconds. Well, there it is. So in Joshua 10:12 to 14, then spoke Joshua to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel. And he said in the sight of Israel, Sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. It is not written in the book of Jashir. I'm not great with Hebrew names. So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven and hasted not to go down about the whole day, and there was no day like that before it or after it, that the Lord hearkened unto the voice of man, for the Lord fought for Israel. And Laodiceans 4:26, which you would know Laodiceans as Ephesians, it says, "Be ye angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath." So that just one example of how the old God was about, like, let this anger drive your actions, whereas you should instead, be ye angry and not be, you know, a degenerate about it. Maybe a better and less long-winded example would possibly be in the book of Psalms in the Holy Bible. He says, "He cast upon them the fierceness of his anger, wrath, and indignation and trouble by sending evil angels among them." However, contrast in Galatians, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith." uh, just more examples of how God clearly is a good God, or at least the God spoken of Christ, and who we believe is the true God, is a patient God. And how often, other examples I can just think of off the top of my head is somewhere in the Old Testament he says, "For I am a jealous God." I think that's in like
Mhm.
it's like super early. It's in Deuteronomy, or maybe even Genesis. It, and just so on and so forth. There's Exodus 21:24, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, hand for a hand, foot for a foot. But
I think
in
that's a couple chapters after the rules for slave owning. I think, if I
yeah,
recall
yeah,
correctly. I think that's what,
exactly.
19. I think.
Yeah, if anything, Yahweh was like, you know what? No shellfish, but slavery. That's tight though.
Yeah.
But in the Evangelicon, Jesus directly contrasts this, and Jesus often contrasts especially Exodus. And unto them smiteth thee on one cheek, offer also the other, which actually that also brings up a really good point, that a lot of Christians in general are targeted in such ways, like, oh well, you're not doing the turning the other cheek thing. While you should be a pacifist, that doesn't mean that you should lack the spine either.
Mm.
You're not supposed to just, bend over and let people take all your stuff. Jesus, I'm gonna misquote this likely, but a man, a well-armed man in a castle will keep peace, or something to that effect. Just off the top of my head, he's more or less saying, take the defensive route, be not offensive. don't go out and push the Palestinians out to Egypt or whatever they're trying to do in
Don't
Gaza.
antagonize.
Yeah, don't antagonize. Don't be the
De-escalate.
person that throws the first punch. Yeah, de-escalate is even better, honestly, because if you can stop a fight without actually throwing any of your own punches, that's absolutely the best way. I've done this before where I finished a fight, someone hit me in the face, and I just kind of like I was genuinely confused. It's like, is that, like, without saying anything, I was like, is this all this guy has? And then he threw a few more, and I was like, bro, I should paraphrase because people from the church will see this, but I was like, you kind of hit like a lady, man. And he threw a few more at me, and I was just like, I just left my hands by my side, and I was like, I could do this all day, my guy. And that ended the fight in probably the best way. And I've been, unfortunately, in more than one fight, and that was probably the most proud of myself I've ever felt. It felt the best on the inside that I had done the right thing by not harming a person, even though this person had thrown a dozen swings at me. And it's not like he didn't do any damage. I had a bloody lip and a little bit, but at the end of the day, I was like, I could probably take this for an hour. I should just let him make a fool of himself. And truly, that ended up being the best result because I didn't get in any sort of trouble. I don't think he necessarily did either, but I'm sure he went away feeling a little bit less like a man.
Yeah, as well he should. I mean, regardless if he had a strong punch or not. I mean, it's kind of one of those things that people say things like, "Oh, there's fighting words" or this or that. And you're like, no, are there really? Unless you're like giving like very, very direct threats that I'm worried you might act upon, there
That
kind of
is
aren't.
that really is a very Christ-like question to ask, because is there really anything someone can say that should stir a physical reaction like that?
Mhm.
And the older I get, the more I'm quite convinced. Like, if someone started saying, your mom this, something outside of like a your yo mama joke, like a non-serious thing, like, it's not that you should just ignore it. Maybe ignoring it might be a good thing to do, but you stand your ground. I guess that this is always going to depend on the situation, but don't be so quick to anger. You know what I mean? When it's only words, meet them with words. If there's a reaction necessary. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Back to Marcionism. We kind of touched on a little bit on the historical significance, and I kind of was wanting to know a little bit, maybe kind of maybe symbolic, and then maybe how that ties into kind of larger spooky concepts. But do you feel like there's anything more on the historical side of things we should hone in on about to what realm the Marcionims resigned in, historically speaking?
I mean, historically, Marcionism kind of, I don't want to say died, but it went underground and likely didn't exist for a thousand years. I think like the second or third pope eventually was like, you know what, let's forgive this Marcion guy, about a couple hundred years after he died, but we'll forgive him. We'll stop calling him a heretic. Not that that stopped anybody in the future, but more or less, like, the Catholic Church kind of took things over from there. Um, but I think it was with De Bun. He was one of the first, or first that I know of, to actually pick this up, and I think they found, like, the recreation that we have now is actually, we've found a bunch of people who were so mad at Marcion. And to that I only have to say, in our book it's Galatians 4:15, in the Holy Bible it's 4:16. So I have told you the truth. Am I now your enemy? Well, he must have told a whole lot of the truth, because he made a whole lot of enemies, and he just lived rent free in their head for probably 100 years after he died. So people were quite mad. Jews, in fact, very, very mad, and
Hmm.
they just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote, and that's how we ended up compiling what we have today. It's almost like a living document because we're always going to, there's at least like if you dig, you can find maybe a dozen different reconstructions of it now. I recommend the Testamentum that I have, and I can tell you more about where to find it at the end of the show. But that's more of like, because there's like the minimalist reconstruction. There's like, we know at least he said this much, but then that's not a complete story. And then there's people who kind of like, overshoot it quite a bit. I think ours is kind of in that middle ground where it's like, this is what makes sense. This goes with the theology, and that's what we have with the Testamentum. Plus, we have the, like I said, the Psalm book, and so much more works besides that as well. But I think it wasn't until like 1700s that people started being curious about Marcion's gospel, as they would call it. And now with the war in Gaza, everyone's like, this non-Judaized Christianity is something else. It hits the palate quite in a refreshing way. That I don't know why I remembered the cream taster meme, guy. Let it sit on the palate a little bit.
By the way, I looked up. It's the First Council of Nicaea, Nicaea, one of those weird words. So that for referring to that earlier, I had to look it up because it was bugging me. So it was not Neon Kitty, but we were close.
It wasn't the neon cat.
Yeah, no, I think we were close though. Okay, I guess you think you have a little bit of a heart out here, so I want to get you out of here. But I guess this is kind of we're kind of right at the last question I have, and kind of bringing this back full circle and the sort of stuff that I kind of like to cover. And you always see these themes of inversion, inversionism when it comes to like Satanism and stuff like that. And I was kind of getting at that you see that, or dialectics and how things play off each other. Like, for example, the Judeo-Christian or the Judaic religions, or whatever, the big three, Islam, Judaism, and
There's that as
Christianity, and
well.
yeah, and how those things play off each other, and then later we discover things like Gnosticism, that then you go, oh wow, this provides a new spin on it, and then now, in a certain sense, you have another inversion of that with Marcionism, in a certain sense, obviously keeping certain themes from things like Gnosticism, but obviously not buying into some of the other stuff. So I guess I'm just kind of curious, because as I've said, you start seeing these symbols play out, these dialectics, so I'm just kind of curious when it comes to symbolism. Is this something that you see? Do you have a unique perspective, coming from where you're at? Because it is always like trying to read the symbolism. They say symbolism will be their downfall, and so you're like, obviously you think Marcionism's the thing. So you may have a different interpretation of all this different symbolism we see. I know it's not uncommon we see like Gnostic themes and stuff. So, but you might interpret that as Marcionism or an inversion of Marcionism, and so on and so forth.
I would say Marcionism is separate from it. Marcionism, we don't really have a whole lot of symbols. We have the Cairo, as you would say, or Chiro. People pronounce it all sorts of different ways. I tried to Latin it up a little bit, but that's the in Latin, the first two letters in Christ, right? The ch and the r sounds. And that is the only real symbol in Marcionism, and even that's kind of like adapted. It's kind of like a Roman thing. It is on, and it is dated to be on there from nearly 2,000 years ago. It is on a Marcionite church that I think still stands, unless Israel's bombed it since I last checked. But for the most part, we don't really do a lot of symbology. We don't really get into that. On the other hand, me personally, I'm very intrigued by this symbology. I know I even got into a little bit of numerology. I personally read these Gnostic texts, but I kind of read it in the sense of like, okay, what does it say in Satan's Bible?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that the Jewish people are sacrificing a red heifer? But that doesn't have anything really to do with Marcionism. It comes off as idolatry, right?
Yeah.
Like all these weird symbols. You don't really like symbols are a material thing. God is a spiritual thing. You don't like anytime you go and use a symbol like that, to me it feels like you're trying to control the spirit with a material thing, and that just doesn't really seem like a spiritual experience to me. Seems like witchcraft essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially.
All right, Tiller. I know we said we want to get you out of here around this time, so we'll do just that. I don't know if you have anything you want to promote. If there's anything you want to let people know on your way out. I mean, I guess maybe any final thoughts on Marcionism. The floor is yours. If anything, promote or just final words or whatever.
The only thing I really want to promote is the Marcionite Church of Christ.org. If you want to find me personally, you can go there, and we have our own Discord and our own Telegram channel. You can find me under the alias Tiller, um, and whatever my username for those particular things are. Um, and that's essentially it. As far as final thoughts, just as cheesy as it sounds, just try to think more of what Jesus would actually do. And actually, one final point. What I should clarify what Jesus would actually do, not what was then later interpolated into the text and added to make him seem more Jewish. Jesus was not a Jew. Even if you think for some reason he was born of a virgin, that's a virgin, and God put supposedly the spirit into that virgin. So how is he then a Jew? That said, MarcioniteChurchofChrist.com. Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure, honestly. It's been a good laugh.
Yeah, it's
Hopefully,
fun.
hopefully I've churched it up enough. I just actually realized about like 10 minutes ago that I am wearing a death metal shirt to talk about Jesus, but I feel like that just, it's what it is.
Death metal and cat ears. That's the way to roll. But for those who want to support my what I'm doing over here, leave a like, share, subscribe, comment, leave a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. You can find the show on YouTube, Rumble, all the major audio podcatchers. You can find it on Twitter at TowerGangJose. And if you want to support the show the best way you can do that with money over at patreon.com. Just no way Jose 2020. You can see the QR code up here. If you want to go that route. And the low level of $2, you get a whole host of perks. You get access to early episodes. I do about 1 to 2 of those a week, just like this one right here. Keep about 4 of those behind the paywall on a given time. You also get access to the ad-free RSS feed. You get access to Telegram and to the pre-show, the post-show, and video calls from me and Austin's weekly live call-in show, Already Dead, which is on Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Also get a big shout out to my sponsors. This is a big thank you for everything they do, for their support. Big shout out to the homie, previous co-host on Tower Gang, at Learner Toad, also at Brigade D's, at ZOVRCK, at _Finzeal, Tim Tell, Jolly and Klebold, big fan of the show, Torn May, at Wayne Tackless, one in here, Car for Kids, No Free Lunch, Jack, Mark Vestibule, and Jacob Winograd of the Biblical Anarchy Podcast. And with that, guys, we're going to get out of here. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.